The photo you're looking at right now kind of sucks, doesn't it? Well, I mean, it's not terrible, but what you're looking at is a shot that is not lit properly. I want you to look at the way that light transitions on the face. What you're looking at is a bright area and then a shadowed area, and you can see a clean line delineating between the lit area and the not lit area of the face. We are talking about specularity today. Hi, how's it going? My name is Joe. Welcome to my website. What we're looking at today is specularity in the home studio and how to understand it, how to create it, and how to eliminate it if that's what your goal is. The idea that you're looking at on that photo is not the difference between how bright one side of the face is and how dark the other side of the face is. That's a concept called light contrast. What we're looking at is how fast it transitions between bright area and dark area. And that speed of transition we call specularity. If it's a really hard, snappy line, that's high amounts of specularity. Some people would call that hard lighting. Or you might just say that it's really kind of dramatic lighting, because sometimes we want to create that effect in the studio. If you shoot and you create an effect where it transitions very smoothly, very evenly across the face, then that's very low specularity, and some people call that soft lighting. There's a real kind of concern that happens with those of us in photography and in lighting, where people think that soft lighting is good lighting and hard lighting is bad lighting, and that's not true at all. It's a matter of being able to get the effect that you're looking for. When I'm doing a very dramatic shot, I'll go for very specular effects on the face. But let's understand how it happens. That's going to be really key for us. So I shot that picture with just one flash, and it was this flash right here. And it was shot just like this, right? Flash on a light stand without any modifier on it whatsoever. So specularity is caused in a very, very simple and straightforward way. Specularity is caused by the number of angles from which light hits the subject from one particular source. So if I have just one flash head like this, then the area that the light comes out of is relatively small. It travels relatively short distance. That doesn't give it a lot of time to spread outward. And because of that, light hits the subject from not very many angles. When that happens, you get very short transitions between lit area and non-lit area. If you find a way to make the light source, in other words, the last thing that the light hits or comes from before it hits the subject, if you make the light source itself bigger, then light hits the subject from a greater number of angles, and that makes smoother transitions on the face. That decreases specularity. So if I have just the flash head by itself, then that's going to be a pretty small light source, and that is going to create more specular highlights or specular lighting effects on the face. When you see photographers use some piece of equipment and put it onto the flash to change the size of the light source, the effective size of the light source, that's called a modifier, and modifiers are made to make the light source either bigger or smaller. So what we're going to do next is we're going to shoot a photograph, and I'm going to use a modifier. I'm going to tell you right now what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this modifier right here. So this is one of the Westcott Apollo soft boxes. I love these. They're fantastic. It's what I use for a lot of my stuff. They open up and it creates a nice large softbox. So I'm going to put that over the flash, change no settings on the camera, change no settings on the flash, and shoot another picture and see if we can change the way that light transitions on the face. And we're going to do that right now. So as you can see, just by putting the modifier onto the flash, the light's hitting me in this self-portrait from more angles, and it creates a much more even change of the light on the face from the lit side to the not lit side. It still has a decent amount of light fall off. We're still getting a darker and brighter side of the face, but the transition is much more pleasing. So that is what we call soft lighting, and it's caused just like this. I've got my softbox here, and instead of the light from the flash being only the size of the actual flash head, which is that big, The light is now being bounced around the inside of this modifier. Now the flash is that big, and that is a much greater amount of angles of light to hit the subject. So when we're shooting a portrait, we want to decide what kind of effect we want. A lot of the time we might want this kind of bright, airy effect. We'll do something possibly called high key lighting. That's where we would light the white background behind me, make it pure white, and we would have really smooth transitions on the face, very low amounts of specularity, high key lighting. Sometimes we're doing an effect where we want to have a more dramatic look on the face, more shadowed areas, more kind of specular drop-offs from bright area to dark area. And we would use smaller and smaller modifiers. I'm using, even in my shoots where I'm using a really large softbox, I still have at least one very specular light, and it's always this. I love this. So I've just got a regular flash here, but what's on it is a gridded snoot. So something that actually takes the light source and makes it smaller. We grid a light to make it so that the light can't kind of come from multiple angles, can't spread out. It has to be a very small beam, and that actually narrows the size of the flash head. That creates a very specular light, and I'm using that for hair lights. I don't shoot a portrait at all anymore without at least a hair light. So I've always got two flashes going, even if I'm not lighting a background and only doing one primary light on the face. Primary light, hair light. So one that's really soft, one that's really hard. I'm doing that quite a bit these days. If I'm doing a shoot that has two lights on the face to reduce light contrast, I'll still have a hair light, so still one specular light source. And if I'm doing a very low-key shot, right, something with dark background, more specular lights, then I'm going to have a smaller main source and a small hair light. So that's the ways that you can mix some specular and non-specular, or low specularity at least, light sources. The same thing works when you're working outside. If you're working outside, then the specular light should be your hair light. And if you're outside, the most specular light is going to be sunlight. So when we walk outside to do a portrait, we walk outside, we take the sun, and we put it behind the subject. Always behind the subject. That becomes the hair light. Now you use a modifier to light the front of the subject. You'll get really nice and even light every time. That's what I've got for you on specularity today. Thanks for checking out my my blog and some of the writing and some of the videos that I've got here, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot.